Hello, F2 Fan 5000 here. Just want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the Japanese Super Formula, and I want to talk about Leonardo Fornaroli as well, of course. So, in Japanese Super Formula, we saw that Ayumu Iwasa took the title. I think he did a very good job, and I want to say congratulations. It's worthy of note that he's suffered mechanical DNFs. He's finished every race except for the wet race behind the safety car at Fuji. Finished every race in the top four, and he's taken 7 podiums, I believe. That's on top of 2 mechanical DNFs, 1 race that was run behind the safety car, and he was starting from the back. Crashed out in the opening lap. Whether that's contact with Igor Fraga or it's his own mistake, well, Fraga didn't get a penalty, so we'll see about that. So the journalist, Jamie Klein, is a very good journalist. He's a British journalist that lives in Japan and has learnt to speak Japanese, and he brings us a lot of good content, and some of it's paid for content. So he talks about, sort of like feeder series, he talks about where he suspects drivers are going to go next year, and this is where Fornaroli comes in, among other drivers, but I think especially Fornaroli. I want to talk about it because I don't want to spoil Jamie's paid content with, giving it away, but let's just, when it comes to Fornaroli, let's just say it's Team Impul, and I think that's a very bad move for Fornaroli. What did Alex Palou say when he's in the court case against McLaren? He said, of course you have to have the best team, the best car possible to fully showcase your talent. Now, Fornaroli wouldn't want to drive for VAR or Triton in F2. So why drive for Impul? When you're a talented driver, you always want to showcase what you can do. And if in Super Formula your only option is Impul, it's better to look somewhere else. Yeah, there's still seats available. There's seats in Indy Next. There's seats in Super Lights if he wants to go down that path. See, here's the thing, right? Think about it. Dennis Hauger was a driver that never really shone in Formula 2. I don't believe he ever finished in the top 5 in the championship standings, and yet he has an IndyCar seat for next year. Now, what did Dennis Hauger do? Well, it's basically like Colton Herta, but in reverse, right? So some of the drivers that do well in Formula 2, maybe they think, I've done well in Formula 2, the Premier feeder series in Europe, so I should be able to get a seat. If I can't get a seat in Formula 1, there'll be a seat for me in Formula E or Japan or IndyCar. But don't forget, these are international series. The IndyCar, the Super Formula, they're high-level series, the top level of motorsport. So you can't just... And what Dennis Hauger, they have their own feeder series ladder over there in IndyCar. And what Dennis Hauger did is he understood that, and he showed respect to that. And he went to Indy Next and won their title. So even though he was a Formula 3 champion and a Formula 2 veteran, he did not look for an IndyCar street seat. He did not look for an IndyCar seat straight away. He went to Indy Next and showed the IndyCar teams that he respected their ladder. And of course, I don't like to see a potential Formula 2 champion in that situation where they have to go to somewhere like Indy Next or Super Lights. But if it's what you have to do, it's what you have to do, right? Now, KO Colette, he didn't have the budget for F2, but now he's an IndyCar driver because he went to Indy Next, and they appreciate that he showed respect to their system there. Obviously, going to Super Lights hasn't worked out for Esteban Masson probably the way he wanted, but I suppose if you're a really talented driver and you get a good car, you can win Super Lights. Or if you get a good car, a good team, and there are still teams available, you can get a seat in Indy Next. I suppose with Fornaroli, he might do a deal with an F1 team, I want to be a reserve driver, but, if you're an F1 reserve driver, maybe it doesn't make sense to go to Indy Next. There's no point, if you want to showcase your talent, to go to a series like Super Formula and go to the teams that are at the back of the grid. Yeah, it's exactly like Colton Herta, he doesn't want to come to F2 and drive for Trident or VAR or AIX. These teams, he cannot showcase his talent, so he has to go to the better teams, and Hi-Tech is, in this ground effects era of F2, Hi-Tech is one of the best teams, if not the best. They have a very fast car for 2 years in a row now. Obviously, Paul Aron and Omri Cordil did a lot of good work for that team last year, and Luke Browning in particular, but also Bogdanovic have carried that on. But the point is, also there's other drivers going to Super Formula or trying to. I think Richard Verschoor, because I think that's a good fit. Well, I don't know if he'll get a seat in Super Formula. And, someone like Zakko Sullivan, to me, is perfect for Impul. He can continue his single-seater journey, but there's less expectation, there's less pressure. He just wants to basically keep the wheels moving, so to speak, and keep his journey going. And although his results this season in Super Formula have not been stellar, I don't feel as though his pace was that far away from Kenta Yamashita, his more experienced teammate. So I'd also think it's a shame that if Zakko Sullivan dropped off the Super Formula grid, and to me, as I said, that Impul seat, that'd be good for someone like Zakko Sullivan, rather than someone like Fornaroli, who has more momentum behind him and really wants to showcase what he can do with his talent. Actually, I wanted to add a bit more onto that, so I've done some digging, some research, and there's a lot happening on the scene at Indy Next. This team called Chip Ganassi, which is basically the biggest, bestest team in IndyCar at the moment, and have been for many years one of the top teams, they now have opened a Indy Next team, and they have 4 seats available for next year. And not only that, but HMD, which is one of the best teams in Indy Next, that have taken KO Colette to wins and now IndyCar itself, they also have seats available. Over in Japan, in Super Lights, the best 2 teams appear to be B-Max and Tom's. And as of the 27th of November, neither of these teams have announced a driver for next year. So if I was someone like a driver from F2 that doesn't have a path into F1, that doesn't want to give up on my dream, I'm someone that would have been perfect for this would have been like Teo Pourchaire, or maybe now Leonardo Fornaroli. or, some of the other drivers that have been on the cusp, like Fred Vesti. I mean, there are good seats available in these series, and these series can lead somewhere, can lead to a good career in single seaters. Sometimes, especially if you go to Japanese Super Formula, you want to make a relationship with Toyota. But isn't it better to get a good seat in somewhere like Super Lights rather than trying to get in the worst team in Super Formula? Indy Next, as we've seen with Hauger, with Collett, drivers whose careers had reached a dead end, just by giving that respect to the feeder series ladder in other parts of the world, in other racing series, by giving that respect, it's landed them in a position that drivers who have achieved more in Europe, they're without it. Drivers that have won F2 or runner up like a Fred Vesti, a Paul Aron, these drivers, they do well in F2, but you can't expect, if the door's closed to F1, you can't expect that IndyCar or Formula E or Super Formula, especially IndyCar and Super Formula, because they have their own feeder series, they're not just going to throw the door open to you. Oh, you did well in F2, and as I'm saying, there's good seats. And I also checked the calendars. There's 2 clashes. So I suppose we're getting into budget issues here, but I suppose you could do a full Super Lights campaign and a partial Indy Next campaign and only miss 2 of the 14 races. I mean, and as I said, Chip Ganassi, their first year that Chip Ganassi had a Indy Next team was 2025. The driver was Niels Coulin, right? But Niels Coulin finished in the top 10 of the Indy Next Championship. So I don't think their car is too bad. And then, as I said, the 2 best teams and I want to go back to Chip Ganassi, right? We know that this is like, if you drive to Chip Ganassi in Indy Next, and in the next couple of years, Scott Dixon might be retiring, Kevin Simpson might move on. I don't know. Maybe he's not getting the results they were hoping for. There's possibility there. And I think some of these drivers coming out of F2 are missing the trick here, that are missing the... Imagine you join the Chip Ganassi team in Indy Next and you're winning races. Why are they going to hire someone else? You're putting yourself in the box seat for one of the best seats in the whole world in terms of single-seater motorsport. It's not F1, but if the F1 door is closed, you have to take the better or best of the alternative options. You have to plan properly. And as I said, some of these drivers rushing off to Super Formula next year might find they're making the wrong decision, especially if they're going to drive for backmarking teams. Let's say you're a really good driver, you're at Team Impul in Super Formula, you're maximising the car, you're finishing 8th and 9th most races. If you're absolutely maximising, and no one's going to think, oh wow, he's world champion material, your career is going to fizzle out. So that's where we're at now with or even something like Kondo. You can't win races at Kondo. This stat, Igor Fraga won the race at Nakajima. It's the first race in 3 years not won by either Toms, Mugen, or Dandelion. I know that the car kit in Super Formula is spec, but there's a lot of variation between the teams, and unless you're in one of those 3 teams, you can't really showcase your talent. And as I said, the best way to get into the top teams in Super Formula is get into the B-Max car in Super Lights and win races, win the championship. The best way to get into a top seat in IndyCar is probably the same thing. Go to Indy next, win races, championships. Not expect to get the VIP treatment because you did well in Formula 2.